Welcome to AOL. You've got post.
Welcome. You've got mail.
Please state your handle and the years you were active on AOL.
My handle was FLaMe, and I was active from 1997 until, I would say, early 2001.
Nice. When did you first use a computer?
First used a computer, I was really young. My family always had like these old like Apple computers in the 80s I remember using. And then in elementary school, I can remember playing games like Oregon Trail and Where the World is Carmen Sandiego and stuff like that on the old computers. So I basically always remember using a computer, although obviously back then computers are much different than they are now.
Yeah, that was much the same for me. I loved Carmen Sandiego. I think I learned all the capitals in Europe on that.
Yeah, those games were fun. I thought they were really cool.
Yeah, back then they were super awesome. I think I tried to play a couple when I was older, and I was not as entertained.
Yeah, I had loaded up an Oregon Trail like just online somewhere like 5 years ago, and after about 20 minutes, I was like, all right, I'm done with this.
I think the only game I played when I was older that was just as good as when I was younger was Contra, the first one.
Oh yeah, I just played it at a arcade bar recently, and that was pretty cool.
Nice. So how did you get into programming?
It was just something that I just wanted to do after I saw people using, the hacking programs on AOL. I was like, oh, I really want to be able to make those. And once I got into the scene, I just asked people a lot of questions and then went to like a mass mail or a server room and got Visual Basic 3.0 Pro and just kind of taught myself some, but, just from friends in the scene, asked a lot of questions and got a lot of help. And slowly but surely, got good enough to make decent programs. I'm not going to say I was a great programmer, but, I was okay.
Do you remember the first time you got on AOL? Like, how'd you end up on AOL?
Yeah, I can remember we got the internet. I think it was like around January of 97. And we got, most people who get the internet for the first time in the 90s, at least the mid 90s, got AOL. And so we got on AOL, and I just remember it was like kind of like finding a whole new world. Basically, it's the best way I could describe it. Like, it was just I just knew it was going to be huge. It already was, but like, I was like, everybody's going to use the internet. Like at the time, not everybody had it. And I was like, everybody's going to use it. You could communicate with people so easily. Like now it's just kind of take it for granted. But back then, like if you had friends that lived across the country, you would either have to dial long distance to call them or send them a letter in the mail and hope they mail you one back eventually.
And long distance wasn't free, right?
Right. Yeah. So like, times were different then, and I just loved it. I just loved the chat rooms, just talking to people. Like I was like 12. So it was just, I had a lot of free time and I really enjoyed it. But then I remember there was a couple kids at school that I overheard talking about like hacking on AOL. And then, you would always be in a chat room and you'd see somebody load a program up like BetaX or whatever. And, the chat would say something, and I just thought that was cool. And I wanted to get it. And eventually somebody sent me, it was either FadeX or Hellraiser. Those were definitely the first two programs I got. And I just remember sitting there ready to download it, like almost feeling like there was like a devil in one ear saying, do it. And like an angel saying, don't do it.
That's a great.
And, I was like, what's going to happen? Like, I was just like nervous about it, for the first time. Then you load it up and you see it in action, and it was just super cool. But then I ended up getting into it with some guy online. I don't even remember exactly what happened, but he was some hacker, and he ended up getting our account terminated.
Was it like the one your family was paying for or something?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so my mom had to call AOL to get it back. And I remember that this was like right before school was getting ready to start back up. And then it got terminated again, and I didn't even like want to say anything because my parents didn't really use it.
Right.
So like they like wouldn't have even noticed, but I was just like, I didn't even want to say anything. I just like, oh, well, there's those two hacker kids at school. I'll talk to them and they'll get me on. And I ended up giving my lunch money to one of the kids to get some usernames and passwords.
And then from there, did you just learn how to fish yourself, or?
Well, I bought one from them and it like died instantly. I'm like, dude, it died. So I had to buy more. And I was like, I don't want to not eat at school again. So I better figure out how to do this on my own, is literally what happened.
That's pretty good incentive, right?
Yeah. So I just started like fishing on my own to, get some more accounts. And then from there, just found like private rooms with other people. And like, I can remember ditching school, telling my mom one day that I was sick just to like hang out in those hacking rooms once I discovered them.
They were super addicting. Super addicting.
Yeah, it really was. And it was, I don't know, it really was super addicting. That's probably the best way to put it. But like, you felt like, I don't know, it felt like you were a part of something, once you started to meet some of the guys and become friends with some of the guys in those rooms. And from there, it just, eventually somebody's like, oh, well, here's a password stealer, edit this to put your email address in it. And so you start sending those out.
What type of
And
password stealer was it?
if they like logged in, it would like sort of freeze their AOL for a handful of seconds, and it would email you their password, and then it would delete the email. But it happened quick though, but it would kind of like lock up their screen for like 5 seconds maybe. Like I remember also, the password crackers where like you could search, like profiles, like for some random word, like to gather usernames. And so like, I hated that band Hanson. And I just remember like early on, this was like when I first got like a decent amount of passwords from cracking. I just searched for Hanson and I just kept getting all these usernames, and I would just look up the password Hanson with them. And so many of these people had the password Hanson.
That's hilarious. That's really creative.
That's kind of what got me like started after, like, say I fished and got like 20 or 30 passwords over X amount of time. But that was like when I first actually got like a decent amount of passwords cracking. And it was actually from the Hanson thing I did.
Were you manually cracking, or is that like, or do you have an automated one?
No, there was a password cracker. I don't remember which one was the first one I used though. I think it might have been by Pizza actually.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I was really big into cracking. I ended up getting into a group with a couple of guys pretty early on, and they were really good. They had a really good password list.
Do you know where they got the password list from?
One of them just made them like over time, or I think they kept adding on to it. Like occasionally we would talk and I'd be like, oh, hey, this password, add this one. And I don't remember how many passwords are on the list, but it was a good list.
Do you know what AOL's complexity requirements were at the time for passwords?
A lot of people just literally put their password as like 1, 2, 3, 4 and stupid stuff like that.
That's great. So early internet, right? That AOL didn't even think it'd be an issue.
Yeah, that was probably my most enjoyable time on there, was cracking passwords and cracking host accounts, overhead accounts, internal accounts, like stuff like that. And I always loved being able to scroll on those accounts because you could scroll and then you get a program that would just scroll this really cool stuff. Cause, normal accounts, if you scrolled, you get knocked offline temporarily.
Yeah, or like gag you or something, right?
Yeah, but and you could gag people with like those accounts and just basically raise hell.
Nice.
So I guess I wasn't in the scene my first, 6 to 8 months on AOL, but once I got in, then it was even more addicting than, first getting AOL, which was addicting enough as it was.
Why do you think it was so addicting?
It was just so new, I think. It was just like discovering a whole new world. Instead of doing the same old thing every day, now, like, you can just talk to people. You could do this. You could read about stuff. You could do like basically anything. It was like the wild, wild west on there.
Yeah, it was like the learning and the trial and error and the collaboration to build something, or just say like, I did this or I did that, and people pat you on the back, right?
Right. And just like, with programming, like getting a little bit better, it was really rewarding. Like basically every aspect felt really rewarding, like getting better at cracking, getting better at fishing, getting better at spamming, whatever. Like there was always like another challenge, it seemed like. In some ways it seems like just yesterday, and in some ways it seems like a lifetime ago, but like I could still remember just some of the stuff that I did on there.
What kind of stuff did you do?
Like I always love the riots. Like, do you remember the email riots where they'd be like, "Oh, we're having this hacking riot."
What are the riots?
Yeah, there'd occasionally be riots, and they try to get basically any idiot who had like FadeX or one of those programs to just go on and just raise havoc in the chat rooms, like
Oh yeah.
every X amount of time.
Yeah, no, I think I may have participated in some of those, but usually it would just be me annoying a chat room. That's funny. So it's kind of like a room raid or something.
Yeah, and like I just remember a couple of them were really big. All the like just chat rooms would just there would just be so many idiots like us just going on and raising hell and pissing everybody off, just trying to punt everybody offline. And I don't know. Like I remember like just being in one, like I don't remember who started it. Somebody would like start a mail chain and keep sending it out like weeks in advance.
Like was a planned one.
Yeah, like in like just try to like scare people. And like I remember like they'd like send out like emails saying there's gonna be a riot, and if you're online you're gonna get your account terminated, like just to try to like scare people.
Interesting.
Yeah, just kind of stupid stuff like that I thought was really fun.
So what programs did you make?
The only one I really sent out like a decent amount was Austin 316 Punter. And I made other ones, but like I kind of made programs like more just for me and some of my friends after that. It was like, I don't know, like I remember after I sent out Austin 316 Punter, like some of the guys in the chat room were like, "Oh, you're just trying to be AO famous." That was like their quote or whatever for like being
Really?
famous on AOL. So after that, I was like, okay, then I'm just going to make programs and not send them out to anybody. It was just kind of stupid, but yeah, like that was the main one that I had sent out. And I remember just like, I had a Hotmail account that I had made like, for like on there, like about me or for questions or whatever. And a lot of people emailed me.
Really?
And I thought that was pretty cool. But then after that, I just kind of like, I made a resetter after that, try to like turn people's accounts.
How would you like literally like what would the code do?
It
How would you
would
term someone?
basically, you would make it look like they sent you like whatever line of text, like make it look like they were trying to fish you or just say something really like stupid and bad. And then you would go on like multiple accounts and keep sending it to AOL. And AOL would think this guy was like sending messages to all these people, like asking for their passwords or something. Sometimes it seemed like it would work, and sometimes it seemed like it wouldn't. It seemed like almost it was like whoever was probably working at the AOL office, if they wanted to look into it or not.
I remember reading something, and it was about the problem with the pedos or something. And it was saying like, well, we take our members' chat room privacy very seriously, so we can't like look at the chat logs unless there's like a police investigation or something like that.
AOL like would just like to protect the pedophiles, which is I guess how basically all this all started, like with the AOL program. The guy was pissed off about that who wrote it.
Right.
And like I remember I used to go into some of those private rooms and mess with those guys and virus those guys and stuff like that. Like I remember there was a private room free, which basically meant for like preteen. Somehow AOL like didn't shut that down, but yet they would shut down the hacking chat rooms. It made no sense.
Right.
So I would like go in there and pose as like an underage girl and virus guys and like send them password stealers.
Nice.
And then like some of the guys would like just be instant messaging and they'd be like, "Oh, where are you from?" Like, and then they'd like want to call for phone sex, and I'd look up the FBI's phone number and I'd give them the FBI's phone number to call.
It's so funny.
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing that. But like, and at the time, I don't even think, like, I knew it was like these people were bad, but like, and I knew they were creepy, but now, like, looking back on it, now that I'm older, it was even more creepy than I realized.
Right. Yeah, no, that's totally true.
Like, the fact that AOL kind of protected these losers, like, I don't even understand. Like, that should have been their number one, like, goal to get these people arrested or whatever. And they did nothing, and yet they would like shut down hacking chat rooms and like mass mail rooms. I remember being like in mass mail rooms and like Catwatch would come in and boot you offline.
Right.
But then the preteen room, oh, that's okay. Yeah, you guys can just do whatever you want in there.
it's all the money, right? So I believe what happened with the Juarez scene during that time, there's the two FBI operations, and some of that software costs like $25,000, and the FBI got pressure from businesses, and so then AOL had to do something about it. But no one was pressuring AOL about all the pedos. There was no money in that, right? AOL was just, they were trying to increase their bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on back then.
So why did you leave AOL?
I just didn't enjoy it as much anymore. Like, I didn't care about like cracking anymore. I didn't spam anymore. I still had a bunch of passwords, and I would still, even though I like kind of left the scene, I would still go on and sub 7 people, because that was kind of the last thing I enjoyed doing. So I would just kind of like send out sub 7 stuff and get like people's IPs and still do that.
You explain what sub 7 is?
Sub 7 was a program that you would send them a file, and if they ran it, you would get their IP address, and with sub 7, you put the IP address in. As long as they had ran the file, you could basically connect to their computer and do whatever the hell you want on their computer. Like, you could see what they're doing while they're on it, and you could like open their CD-ROM drive and stuff like that, and just kind of drive people nuts. And you could delete their hard drive if you wanted to.
I think you could print to their printer too, right?
Yeah, you could do all sorts of weird stuff.
So just like to random strangers, or is it like specific people, or what?
Yeah, mostly just random people.
Wow, that's cold.
Like, I remember there was I think it was called Matrix. And if you did that, like, a huge chat box would just cover their whole screen, and like your chat box would be like 90% of it, and their chat box would be 10% of it. And you could just like scare the shit out of people.
Big rush.
Yeah, it was fun. That was kind of like the end of it for me, though, like just doing that. And then even then, I kind of just stopped going on AOL altogether. And I think my last sub 7 victims, I would just send stuff out to people on Yahoo chats.
Oh, so you went to not just AOL, but Yahoo?
Yeah, Yahoo had like chat rooms, and like, I don't know, the people there were kind of like noobs. Like, it just seemed like you could just act like you're a girl and say you're sending them a picture, and I would just change the exe file to .scr.
Ooh, yeah, that'll do it.
And people just ran it. I did that on AOL though too. Like, so I got a lot of like people to run password stealers or sub 7 or whatever. I would change it to .scr, and like I'd go to the wrestling chat rooms and be like, Sable was one of the women wrestlers there, and I would just call it Sable.scr, and it'd be like, get your Sable screensaver, and then, it was .scr, so they think it was a screensaver, and they would just all run it.
Yeah, it's so funny because screensavers actually were EXEs back then.
Yeah, you just change the .exe to .scr, and it ran just like an executable.
That's so funny. There was like no protection back then. It was great. And then like the ports, right, the subset I ran over were just, open on people's routers, right?
Right. Like, even on sub 7, like, you could just scan IP addresses. And if somebody had ran one of the sub 7 files and you didn't put it password protected, like, anybody who scanned their IP could just get on their computer, basically.
It's kind of similar. Are you familiar with Shodan at all?
No, what's that?
So Shodan, I believe it's Shodan.io. It's basically a record of open ports on the internet. And so it scans the internet at a certain interval. And it will show you, let's say, all of the webcams that are just open to the world right now. And all of the Elasticsearch clusters, for example. So sometimes I poked around some of those. And a lot of times there's like a message in them that like, we've encrypted your Elasticsearch cluster. But beyond that, if someone put like let's say a web shell or something, right? Unless you password protect it, someone else can just hop on the web shell, right, and do what they want. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had never even heard of that.
Yeah, Shodan's pretty interesting. Can you talk about your spamming, like why you started spamming?
A lot of my friends were doing it and making thousands of dollars a month.
Interesting. That's a lot at that young of an age.
Yeah, but like, I was always like paranoid of getting in trouble with my parents. So basically, I had a friend at school and I said, hey, if I could put your name here and your social security number, you get the checks, you give me half the money. Deal? And he's like, yeah. So that's what happened. And one day they got a letter from a lawyer to his house representing Cyber Entertainment saying that we were spamming on AOL, and that was the end of that.
Interesting. So what was the social security number for like tax reporting purposes for like the company you're getting paid for the spamming?
Yeah, Cyber Entertainment was just like, I don't know, it would be like these porn sites and like you would spam it out, and anytime somebody signed up, you would get like $30 or something. And the only reason we even got in trouble is we go to pay per click, and then somehow all of a sudden we get a letter from a lawyer. Like, I don't think they cared until we went to pay per click. Then all of a sudden they magically cared about the spam.
Huh. I wonder why.
I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Per click to go to the site or per?
Yeah, like you'd basically, I'd make like an Angel Fire page or something like that all it had was a banner for like the porn site we were spamming. And if somebody clicked the banner, once we went to pay per click, we would get however many cents a click or whatever it was.
Oh, and so instead of sign up, it was.
Yeah. So the signups, they didn't care. I don't think they really cared. But when we went to pay per click, then, this guy's spamming,
Maybe it was easier to track to a specific user account with a pay per click versus the actual sign up, right?
Yeah, I have no idea. But once that happened, I was still in the scene for probably another year, roughly. That was kind of the beginning of me slowing down on AOL, was when we got that letter from the lawyer.
Interesting. I'm still mulling over the difference between the sign up and the click. They didn't like that you were sending a bunch of traffic, collecting money for people that weren't signing up because you were spamming it. Okay, now it makes sense.
Basically, also, like what I did with the sign-ups is steal credit card numbers. And I was always too paranoid. Like, I didn't even want to use it myself, but I would just go to one of the hacking rooms and be like, hey, who wants a free card? And somebody would message me and I'd be like, okay, but you got to do something for me. And I'd give them the link and say, you got to sign up here with that card. And they would. And so that was like a way to get like sign-ups while I was spamming also.
So before it wasn't pay per click, it was just spamming, and then if they signed up with like your code or something, or how'd that work?
Yeah, like if they clicked the banner and signed up, I would get like $30 or whatever.
Okay, so they click the banner, probably a cookie drops in their system, and then they sign up, and then their referral fee goes to you.
Right.
But then when you change the model to just click, they probably saw that they were getting a bunch of traffic, but nobody was signing up, but they were paying you a lot more. I wonder if it was more like they were paying you for nothing and they got mad.
Well, we were also probably getting less signups because at that point, I had no reason to go and steal cards and give them to people to sign up for my page. But I just found it kind of funny that the site didn't seem to care that I was getting all these stolen credit card signups as long as they were getting their signups. But once you go to pay per click, you're out of here.
Where'd you get the cards from?
We had this program. I don't remember who originally gave it to me, but whoever wrote it did a really good job. And it was an executable file. And if somebody like ran the executable 5 to 10 minutes later, it would make it look like AOL sent you a message saying that they lost your credit card info. Like, it would freeze your AOL, but it looked so real. Like, you couldn't get back to AOL until you got out of the program. But like, it looked like AOL, and it wouldn't go like right away after they ran it. It'd probably take like 10 minutes. And so it seemed really real. And a lot of people who had that program got a lot of cards, but I didn't make a ton of money, but for being in high school, it was still nice to have some extra cash,
Yeah, I bet. In terms of ethics and stuff, you're talking about the little devil in the beginning, right? When you look back at it now, what are your thoughts on it?
I regret not making more money spamming. That's probably sounds horrible to say, but if I was always just so scared of like getting caught and stuff. So I kind of just tamed it down. I just never wanted to like get into trouble, but like looking back on it at the time, like literally nobody I knew got into trouble. And most of the people I knew made a decent amount of money. So I do kind of regret that, but yeah. And like looking back, a lot of it, yeah, it's kind of bad. Like doing that, I would never do that stuff now. but it was just a moment in time. I guess you had to be there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm thinking about it. If you think about the forensic trail, so the cracked account sends a malicious executable that puts something on top of the screen. Somebody manually types in their credit card number and sends it off, right? To be able to equate the charges on the porn site to that user running the executable and sending it to your email address, I guess I find it very hard to believe that in the 90s, the various private companies and law enforcement would go through all the trouble to tie all of that together. You'd have to get a subpoena from let's say a Yahoo account or Hotmail or whatever, right? You'd have to get that for the specific account that the person sent the email to, but they didn't even know they sent it, right? Because the email is deleted. And so at that point, you'd actually have to have AOL look through a record of sent emails that the end user deleted. And who knows if they were even keeping those at the time, right? So I'm just wondering why it was so effective, and I think maybe that's why.
And with that specific program, I think it might have even sent the email through Winsock, from just a fake email or something, to where that email didn't actually come from their AOL account, if I remember correctly.
Okay. So you bring up a really interesting point. So even today, you can still spoof email. That's actually pretty perfect.
That specific program, that one was probably late 99. Probably that one came out. I don't know who wrote it, but it was really good. Whoever programmed that was a genius.
Yeah. So, let's just say Visa or something realized that there was stolen credit cards to sign up for some particular site. For them to be able to figure out what everybody had in common, and let's just say it was sable.scr, right? For example. And who's going to tell Visa, yeah, I was trying to look at a naked picture of this wrestler. You know what I mean? I just don't see them connecting the dots.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I didn't do that many, but I know people who did, and none of the people I knew ever got caught. And I don't think they would even really be able to figure it out.
I think that the way it would have to happen is the adult site would have to have web logs and record the IP address for each sign up, right? And then you'd have to pull the logs for everybody that signed up with a malicious credit card and see if it all traces back to the same IP addresses. And in that case, you could get a subpoena to find out who is using that IP address. So it depends if they're using a proxy. It could be done maybe, but it would be, you have to wonder about the level of effort here, right? Especially if it's talking a couple thousand, right? Or I don't know the scale, but
for me personally, I had a ton that I just never even did anything with. Sometimes I would just go to some of the hack rooms and just give them away.
But that made you popular.
Yeah, because I was I really was. I was paranoid of getting caught with that kind of shit, and but it was fun to me, and I knew these guys would go and use them, and I'm all right, here you guys go. I don't want this.
Nice. So what are you up to these days?
I'm a professional poker player.
Really? Oh, that's awesome. Do you play professionally on the internet, or did you before the pandemic? Did you play in person in tournaments and stuff, or how's that work?
I've primarily played online, mostly. Occasionally, I'll play in the casinos, and I've played some tournaments. I play mostly cash games though, and I also play daily fantasy sports professionally. Also,
that's really interesting. I know there's. I think it was in the late 90s, there was a lot of DDoS attacks against gambling sites, and they'd be losing millions of dollars a day. And so it was do we pay up or not? Because if they do, then it's just going to keep happening again, a week later, right? And the price is going to keep going up. And then I think I remember there was a couple of cases where people would try to get other people on the poker sites to run malware. And so they could see their cards or do other things at the platform.
Yeah, that had happened. Not a ton, but that there was some instances where it happened. There was a couple high profile instances. I remember one where somebody was kind of friends with the guy, but he went to his house and ran it on his computer, without him knowing. And then some random guys playing him heads up and destroying him. And then eventually they figured it out. But yeah, it is kind of funny that I basically have ended up working the majority of my life online.
Have you ever heard about any of the bugs in some of the video poker games, at the casinos?
No, I haven't. I don't really play the casino games.
I think I actually hit the bug once. I was in this casino in Africa, I won like $500 and like this machine, it just like kept paying out. Later when I learned about it, I'm like, oh, I must have triggered it inadvertently. But of course, as soon as I won that, they started offering me like free beer after free beer. And, before I knew it, I like blew it all on blackjack. But, yeah, eventually I think there was someone there who was like trying to exploit the bug. And of course, casino staff realized it and the guy got arrested and stuff. But, I'm not sure if they actually prosecuted him or not. I haven't really gotten too deep into like what the laws are around like exploiting something that's actually in the game, But there was like the guy on. You ever heard of Press Your Luck?
Yes.
Yeah, with like the whammies.
Yeah.
Did you hear about the whole scandal with that?
No, I didn't.
There's a guy that figured out the pattern, and I guess he won for like weeks on the show. And they like, couldn't get him off the show. They couldn't figure out how he was winning and stuff. And I think the whole story like ends in tragedy or something, like somebody dying or whatever. But yeah, he figured it out, and so they couldn't kick him off the game because he wasn't breaking any rules, but he had figured out like the pattern.
Wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I used to love that show.
Yeah, I would have never even like thought about trying to figure out a pattern with that. Oh, I did want to touch on one of the programs I made, and I didn't send this one to anybody. It was just I made like a Winsock spammer. This was probably a few months before we got caught or whatever, but there was a little community college next to my high school, and we would have classes there. Still, sometimes some of our classes would be there, and we could like use the computers. And so I made, and like a lot of times if you logged in, like the workers there just like didn't care if you didn't log out. Like you're supposed to log out, but not everybody did. And I made this Winsock spammer, and I would just go to school and load it up on the community college computers. And, I would have like the email list, and I made the program. So once you click start, it disappears. And so I was spamming on the college computers for a little bit before we got in trouble.
You just use like their SMTP server?
I don't even remember. It was just like a Winsock spammer. Like I could run it anywhere, and it would just like, it would be like sending people email probably from just like a spoofed email or whatever. It just made it so the program would disappear. So I would go to school and just load it up and walk away. And then eventually they'd shut the computer off. But
right, you get the window handle and you do like the hide window function. But I'm wondering, like, it has to go through a mail server. So I'm wondering, maybe you just had found a mail server, or was this in the code that you had?
I don't remember exactly how it worked, but that was like one of the last programs I made.
Interesting. It sounds like a very efficient way to do spamming and not have it traced back to you. Except that it was running on your account, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, if they wanted to, if they really cared, but nobody cared back then. Like,
that's true. They really didn't, and you could kind of just get away with whatever.
Do you have any other questions or comments?
Maybe your fondest memory from back then, or why you think you enjoyed it so much. It might be interesting.
Oh, my fondest memory. I don't know if there's like one specific one. I think it was just like kind of the feeling that once you get in and you're kind of like accepted by these other hackers in the chat rooms and stuff, it's like, and then you become close friends online with some of them. Like it almost feels like you had like a crew, like almost like in the movie Goodfellas or something. You felt like you had some like online gangster crew, really. And that was probably my fondest memory, just over the years, just having like the friends on there that you were doing all this stuff with and just talking to on a daily basis.
That's true. It's kind of like today where people form like clans and stuff online, right? And it's kind of like you had like your own like clan or crew, and people could share stuff and you have like a sense of accomplishment, right? Yeah,
it was just, it all happened so fast too. Like when I think about it, within like a month, I was friends with just a bunch of the guys in those rooms. It's almost like, they accepted me pretty quickly. Getting, into programming, getting into cracking, doing all that stuff. It all happened just like almost instantly.
Just through a little collaboration with some people, right? How did you get the internal accounts and the overhead accounts? Did you just crack them, or?
Yeah, we would. Occasionally they'd be stupid and run a password stealer. The two guys I did it with, they were named Ice and Buffalo, and somehow they would get list of overhead and internal accounts. They'd say, okay, here, you try to crack these, and they'll try to crack those.
Interesting.
But then eventually they started getting like the secure ID or whatever it was for the internal accounts. So like you would crack it, then you couldn't get in though without like the secure code. And that was kind of when we kind of stopped cracking. But I do remember like sometimes being on accounts like guide accounts, and when they would catch you on there, they would like log you off, and on the log off screen, they could like write a comment on there. Like, after it would say, goodbye, if you had the sound wave file, like on that screen, they could like, whoever bumped you off could like write something. And I remember one time it said busted, and like,
oh, really?
Yeah. And I was like scared that I was going to get in trouble. And I talked to a couple of guys like, oh no, that's just somebody typing it to scare you. And sure enough, it was true. But
there's still a lot of that, I think, today. I think a couple times at least, people have like asked me, they'll be like, oh yeah, like I have this friend who got an email, and in the subject, it's their password, like the password they always use. And that's the subject of the email. Like if you saw an email and the subject was like your favorite password that you always use, you probably open it. So anyway, like the content of the email says, I saw you going to like some explicit websites, and I turned on your webcam and recorded you. And now I'm going to send like these videos of you to everyone in your contact list if you don't send me like $40 in Bitcoin or whatever it is, right? And that was pretty effective. They would send them the ransom or whatever, right? And of course, as soon as you send them anything, then they're going to keep harassing you to try to get as much money as possible, keep threatening you. But I believe the term it's a portmanteau. It's called sexploitation. And really they got a dump of usernames and passwords, and they just emailed everybody in the list of the dump the same basic email. And it's extremely effective.
That's definitely like really a creative way to scare people and get, especially if you're asking for like a somewhat small amount of money also. If you're like, oh, give me $10,000 or I'm going to send it, most of the people are just not going to do it. If you say $40, a lot of people are probably going to do it.
Yeah, definitely. It got so bad, this one company I was working at, we had to actually just ban the word Bitcoin from just all email inboxes. And then we had to ban the word wallet because they would change the B in Bitcoin to be a different character, like a different Unicode. So the B wasn't a normal B. So it's really interesting, like the whole cat and mouse game with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, there's so much crazy stuff going on online now. Just so many like hackers and people doing all that stuff. It's much different than, when we were involved.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much different. Like now it's like these people they're really good at what they do.
Well, yeah, it's true. So a lot of times if you look at the ransomware situation, right, there'll be a developer that develops a ransomware toolkit, and then in the dark web marketplace, you can even like rent out like botnets, right? Or you can like, sell access to a ransomware toolkit. So you don't even have to know how to program to use them, right? So someone develops it, then somebody runs it, right? And someone gets a list of people to send it to. It's like a business in some cases, right? It's kind of weird how like operationalized a lot of this stuff's become.
Yeah, it's way over my head. That's for sure.
Cool. Well, it's been really great talking with you today. Thanks for taking the time to go down memory lane with all this.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. I'm looking forward to hearing more interviews. It's just, it really brings back old memories, and it's kind of cool because, a lot of people were involved in it, and it's just something that's, not really talked about. It's almost like kind of like forgotten. At the time, it was a really big deal.
It's true. It really was. To a lot of people, it was a really big deal. And I feel like everyone kind of just grew up and forgot about it. But some of us didn't. But it's nice to kind of look back on it and just realize like how far we've come since that time. And then also realize like it's never going to be another AOL. I don't think.
Right. It's just, there's no way. It's just the internet's too different now. People who were old enough to remember when they first got on the internet in the 90s, the majority of them used AOL, whether they were in this scene or not. It was a wild time, like with the chat rooms and everything. Now it's like, I can't even remember the last time I was in a chat room.
Yeah, me either. And I mean, if you probably left after like a minute.
Yeah, I can't even remember.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is the people that you end up collaborating with, every single one of them had to have been in a chat room, seen somebody run a program like AOL, and they had to ask the question why, and they were curious enough to keep asking why. And that's how everybody kind of ended up in the same private chat rooms talking about creating programs and stuff, because everybody was curious enough to keep asking why and then being like, that's cool, right?
Right. And like so many people had the programs, like even people who weren't in the scene, like I remember, my friend's neighbor going over to his place and, he wasn't in the scene, but he had a punter and he was trying to pump people offline.
Hilarious.
Like just so many people ended up getting these programs. I do wonder like what happened to some of those programmers who helped me out. And those guys were like legitimately really good. Like I just wonder if they stuck with it or what ended up happening to them. But, it's long gone. I'll probably never be able to find any of those guys. So
Yeah, right. Well, thanks for taking the time to chat with me today. I appreciate it.
yeah, thanks. Thanks for doing this.